So, picture walking into a bookstore, right? You're just looking for something to read over the weekend.
Just a casual browse.
Exactly. And, maybe you've been thinking about putting a garden in the backyard, so you wander over to the horticulture section.
Makes sense.
Right, so you're browsing past the guides on, like, soil composition and raised beds, and you pull out this paperback with a really serene title. It's called The Long Afternoon of Earth.
Which sounds lovely, honestly, like a nice collection of essays.
It really does. You flip it open, maybe expecting some pastoral thoughts about the changing seasons. But instead, you are immediately dropped into this frantic sequence where giant carnivorous vegetables are actively hunting human beings through a jungle canopy.
It's quite the tonal shift.
Oh, completely. And like a few pages later, you've got colossal spider plants spitting literal cobwebs between the Earth and the moon.
It is the ultimate bait and switch. And the funny thing is, that is a genuine phenomenon that happened to quite a few unsuspecting readers back in the early 1960s.
Wait, really? People actually bought it thinking it was a gardening book.
Oh, yeah. So the book we are diving into today is Brian Aldiss's science fiction landmark, Hot House.
Right.
But when it was initially published in the US, the publisher decided to release an abridged version under that highly deceptive title, The Long Afternoon of Earth.
Wow.
And because it sounded so pastoral, it frequently ended up misshelved right alongside, gardening manuals and botanical guides.
I am just picturing a suburban gardener
Right.
looking for tips on pruning their hydrangeas
Yeah.
and instead getting a full-blown existential crisis about sentient predatory fungi.
Right. It's kind of amazing to think about, but, that little publishing quirk really just hints at the dual nature of this entire work.
Yeah, because we're doing a deep dive today into a piece of literature that is simultaneously considered this prestigious masterpiece, but also like a total structural mess.
That is the perfect way to describe it. I mean, Hot House won the 1962 Hugo Award for Best Short Fiction.
Right, because it was originally serialized, wasn't it?
Right. Exactly, as 5 novelettes in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. But almost as soon as it was published, it triggered this massive feud within the sci-fi community.
Oh, the drama. Which brings us to the whole mission for our deep dive today. We really need to figure out why a story that shatters almost every known law of physics and biology, frankly, remains such a pivotal, thought-provoking work.
Yeah, the dividing line on this book was incredibly sharp. You had critics praising it for this sheer unbridled generosity of imagination.
It is super visionary and deeply unsettling.
Totally. But then you had heavyweights of the genre, like James Blish practically foaming at the mouth. He called the entire premise utter nonsense.
Utter nonsense. Tell us how you really feel, James.
Right. Blish famously chastised Aldous for completely ignoring orbital mechanics, gravity, and the basic thermodynamics of plant life.
Which is fair if you're looking for hard science. But we're going to look at how Aldous uses these incredibly surreal, psychedelic images, the vegetable spiders, the mind-controlling mushrooms, the literal devolution of humanity.
It is a wild ride.
It is. And he uses all that to ask some really profound questions about what it actually means to be human when we are no longer the apex predator.
Right, because the hard science fiction of that era really prided itself on predicted accuracy. Authors were trying to reverse engineer the future based on the physics of the present.
And Hot House just abandons that entirely.
And completely throws it out the window. The plot is frequently described as ramshackle. But when we look closer, we find that the chaotic, kind of hallucinatory nature of the world is actually the mechanism Aldous uses.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It lets him explore themes that a strictly scientifically accurate novel just couldn't touch.
So let's start with the crucible that forces all of this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because before we look at how the humans behave, we really have to look at the primary antagonist of the story.
And the antagonist here isn't like an alien empire or a rogue AI.
No, it's the environment itself.
Right. So we are dropped into a setting roughly 2 billion years in our future. The Earth has undergone this radical, catastrophic transformation.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Well, the rotation of the planet has slowed to a complete halt relative to the sun. It is in a state of tidal locking.
Right. And just to clarify for anyone who, hasn't brushed up on their planetary science recently, tidal locking means one hemisphere of the Earth is permanently facing the sun.
Locked in perpetual blistering daylight.
Yeah, while the other half is plunged into this frozen eternal night.
We actually see this all the time in astrophysics. Our own moon is tidally locked to the Earth, which is why we only ever see one side of it.
Oh, true. That makes sense.
And we are discovering exoplanets right now that are tidally locked to their host stars. But Eldest compounds this by having the sun itself entering its dying phase.
So it's not just locked, it's getting cooked.
Exactly. The sun has expanded, it's swollen, dominating the sky, and blasting the day side of the Earth with an eternity of intense, inescapable heat and radiation.
See, I struggled a bit with the physics of what this would actually do to the planet. Because if one side is boiling and the other is freezing, wouldn't the atmospheric dynamics just, like, tear the surface apart?
Oh, absolutely. In reality, a tidally locked Earth would likely feature unimaginable hurricane-force winds at the terminator.
The Terminator.
That's the twilight zone between the light and dark sides. The atmosphere would constantly be trying to redistribute that extreme heat. The day side might just be a completely sterilized desert.
Just a barren wasteland.
Right. But all this takes a totally different route. He posits that under this constant oppressive radiation, the Earth's biosphere doesn't burn away. It goes into hyperdrive,
It becomes a planetary-scale greenhouse.
a literal hothouse, completely dominated by the plant kingdom.
And this is where the grand thematic inversion of the book really takes place. The plants haven't just survived the heat, they have conquered everything.
Everything. They have evolved to fill all the ecological niches left behind by the extinction of the animal kingdom.
We are talking about plants that are mobile, right? Plants with primitive nervous systems, plants with eyes.
It's terrifying. They're predatory.
Yeah, imagine stepping out your front door and your lawn is actively trying to hunt you down.
I mean, it requires a massive suspension of disbelief regarding botanical biology.
Because of the energy required.
Exactly. Plants use photosynthesis, which is a relatively low energy process compared to the metabolic demands of an active hunting predator.
Right, like a Venus flytrap can snap shut, but it isn't running through the underbrush chasing down a deer.
The energy equations for a massive, walking, carnivorous tree simply don't balance out. There's not enough sunlight in the world to fuel that kind of movement.
So if the math doesn't work, what is the literary mechanism at play here? Like, why make the plants the apex predators?
Because it forces a total restructuring of the human ego. Aldous is playing with the idea of deep time and the absolute impermanence of humanity's dominion over nature.
We're so used to being at the top.
We have built our entire philosophy, our religions, and our societies around the idea that we are the pinnacle of evolution, that we are the stewards of the earth.
Yeah, we like to think we're in charge.
But by elevating the passive background of our world, the greenery, into this hyper-aggressive dominant force, Aldous knocks humanity down to the absolute bottom of the food chain.
It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Think about how much of our daily lives, our ability to sit around and debate literature or build technology, relies entirely on the fact that we don't have to spend every waking second checking the bushes for something trying to eat us.
It's a luxury.
A huge luxury.
Yeah.
When you strip that security away, when the literal grass beneath your feet views you as a calorie source, human society just evaporates.
Which leads us directly into how the remnants of humanity are actually surviving in this setting, because they aren't living in the ruins of New York or London.
No, there's no concrete jungle left.
The macro environment has forced a microadaptation. They live up in the canopy of a continent-spanning banyan tree.
Continent spanning. Just try to picture that. And we're introduced to this tribe, though. Tribe is almost too grand a word for them.
It really is. It's just a tiny, desperate handful of people.
Right, and they live entirely in the upper branches because the ground floor is instant death. But even up there, the atmosphere is just suffocating.
It's dripping with humidity.
And the tension is unrelenting. So the leader of this little group is a woman named Lily Yo. And Aldous wastes no time showing us the absolute brutality of this ecosystem.
No, he drops you right into it.
There's this scene early on where the children are playing, and they are ambushed by a tigerfly, which is basically a man-sized, highly evolved wasp.
Just the sheer scale of the insects and plants creates this constant claustrophobic terror. A man-sized wasp is pure nightmare fuel.
It really is. And in the chaos of this tigerfly attack, one of the kids, a little boy named Clat, loses his grip.
It's so sudden.
He falls from the branch down into the lower foliage, and before he even hits the ground, he is snapped out of the air and swallowed by a carnivorous plant called a trapper snapper.
It's incredibly visceral.
But what really caught me off guard wasn't the monster itself, it was Lily O's reaction. Or I guess her total lack of one.
Yes. The text notes that she essentially just accepts it. She says, it was the way.
Right. A child of their highly endangered group is eaten alive, and they basically just shrug it off.
It feels very cold.
I initially read this and thought, well, this is just clunky sci-fi writing. Like, the author just doesn't know how to write complex human emotion.
That's a common initial reaction.
But as the story progresses, I realize the emotional void is actually the point.
It is entirely the point, and it is central to the novel's core theme of devolution.
Let's unpack that, because devolution is a fascinating concept.
When we think of evolution, we often mistakenly think of it as a ladder, right? Leading upward to greater intelligence and complexity.
Like we're constantly upgrading.
Exactly. But evolution is simply adaptation to the environment. If the environment demands simplicity, a species will devolve, or more accurately, adapt downward to survive.
So in this hothouse, grief is an evolutionary disadvantage.
Look at it from a pure survival standpoint. If you stop to mourn, if you allow yourself to be paralyzed by the psychological trauma of losing a community member, your situational awareness drops.
You stop paying attention to the branches.
And in a canopy filled with tiger flies and trapper snappers, a drop in awareness is instantly fatal. So this stoicism, this emotional flattening, it's actually a highly adapted psychological callus.
They've essentially become insects themselves, haven't they?
They really have. The social structure reflects that hive mind simplicity perfectly.
It's a strict matriarchy, right?
It is. The men are a minority, kept alive primarily for breeding purposes. They're very much like drones in a beehive.
Wow.
The humans have shed the heavy metabolic and psychological costs of complex human emotion because those traits are no longer suited to their ecological niche.
That makes perfect sense biologically, but man, it paints an incredibly bleak picture. If life is that cheap, and death is just a daily hazard of the weather, how do they view the end of life?
That's the logical next question.
Right, because if you don't get eaten by a plant, you eventually get old.
Mm-hmm.
And in a society that values only raw survival utility, aging is a huge problem.
Which is where all this introduces one of the most surreal and hotly debated concepts in the entire genre, the ritual of the go-up.
The go-up, it sounds so mystical.
It does. So Lilio realizes she is losing her physical edge. Her reflexes are slowing down. And in the hothouse, there is no retirement plan.
No 401k in the canopy.
No. When you become a liability to the tribe, you are expected to undertake this journey.
So Lilio gathers the other aging members of the tribe, and they climb to the tips. And the tips are the absolute highest, outermost branches of this huge banyan tree.
It's the boundary line.
Yeah, the boundary between the safety of the foliage and the lethal radiation of the dying sun. And once they get there, they find these massive transparent seed pods called burn urns.
Such a great name, burn urns.
And they literally climb inside these pods and seal themselves in.
They're essentially packaging themselves.
Yes, packaging themselves for the traversers. And this is where the story shifts from brutal survivalism into pure, unadulterated cosmic weirdness.
It really takes a left turn here.
Because traversers are giant, spacefaring vegetable spiders. I'm talking creatures the size of a city.
Just gargantuan organisms.
They climb to the very top of the atmosphere and they spin webs. But the webs don't attach to other trees. They spin webs that stretch across the vacuum of space, tethering the Earth to the moon.
Let that image sink in for a second.
It's wild. Because the Earth and the moon are in a stationary orbit relative to each other in this future, right?
Yes. So the traversers use these cosmic cobwebs to crawl across the void to the moon, seeking the unfiltered, intense solar radiation.
And the elders, inside their seed pods, attach themselves to the legs of these giant spiders and they just hitch a ride.
Very dangerous ride.
They travel across the web through space and arrive on the moon. And all this gives the moon a breathable atmosphere.
Which is another massive scientific leap.
Oh, huge. And once the elders are exposed to the raw cosmic rays up there, they physically mutate. They transform into these winged humanoid creatures called flymen.
And the kicker is, those flymen subsequently fly back down the webs to Earth to kidnap human children, just to maintain their population on the moon. Okay, we have to pause here because we need to talk about James Blish again.
Oh, poor James Blish.
Right. When Blish called this book nonsense, this is the specific sequence that broke him. I mean, if you have any foundational knowledge of orbital mechanics, the idea of a spider web connecting the Earth and the moon is physically agonizing to think about.
It completely ignores the Roche limit, orbital velocity, gravity wells. I mean, the sheer tensile strength required to withstand the immense forces of planetary bodies is impossible.
Not to mention the vacuum and temperature extremes of space.
Exactly. A physical tether like that would be shredded instantly by the conflicting orbital dynamics.
It's absurd. But, you know, complaining about the orbital mechanics of the traversers feels like looking at a Salvador Dali painting of melting clocks and pointing out that gears don't work like that at room temperature.
That's a brilliant analogy. You are applying the wrong analytical tool to the art.
There is a great piece of history about the publication of this part. The editor of the magazine that originally serialized it, Robert P. Mills, was actually warned by his scientific advisors that the physics were garbage.
They told him not to print it.
But he ran it anyway. He stated later that the image of the Earth and the Moon, sitting side by side, bound together by the cobwebs of giant space spiders, was just too outrageous and appealing to reject.
It's the triumph of aesthetic awe over hard science.
Absolutely.
But what Aldous achieves with that aesthetic is a brilliant subversion of religious and spiritual tropes. Think about the concept of the go-up.
It sounds like an ascension, like going to heaven.
I should say it strongly parallels the language of ascension. Many cultures have myths about ascending to a celestial realm, leaving the mortal shell behind to become a higher being.
The angels in the sky.
Right. Aldous takes that deeply metaphysical, spiritual concept and grounds it in brutal physical biology.
It's not a soul leaving a body. It's a physical mutation caused by space radiation.
Yes. He replaces theology with extreme evolutionary biology. The afterlife is just a real rock in the sky.
And the angels are just mutated old people who come back to steal your kids.
Which is horrifying. He is stripping away the comforting mysticism of religion and suggesting that even our concepts of the divine might just be biological imperatives we don't fully understand yet.
That is so dark, but so fascinating. So with the elders off becoming mutant angels, the narrative focus snaps back down to the canopy, to the younger generation left behind.
Who are suddenly without guidance.
Right. The tribe is now led by a child named Toy. And without the experienced leadership of Lilio, disaster strikes almost immediately.
They attempt to hunt or scavenge a giant seed creature known as a sucker bird.
But they lack the coordination and experience of the elders. So instead of securing a meal, they become trapped on the creature as it takes off in a panic.
It carries them far beyond the boundaries of their known world.
Yeah. They eventually crash on a distant, unfamiliar coastline. They literally go from the frying pan into the fire.
And this transition is crucial because it isolates our main protagonist, a young man named Gren.
Yeah, up to this point, the story has been very ensemble-focused. We've watched the collective hive mind of the tribe. But Gren is different.
Very different. For one, he's male, which puts him at the bottom of the social hierarchy.
Right.
But more importantly, he possesses a trait that the rest of the tribe bred out long ago: curiosity and rebellion.
And in a society that relies on absolute, unquestioning conformity for survival, an individual who questions orders is a lethal threat to the group's cohesion.
His friction with the group dynamics inevitably leads to his banishment. He is exiled.
Which is basically a delayed death sentence. He is wandering this hostile jungle completely alone. And that isolation sets him up for an encounter with what I think is the most terrifying element of the entire novel.
It really is a shift in the type of horror we're dealing with.
Like, a physical monster is scary, right? A giant wasp is scary. But Gren encounters a psychological monster. He is attacked by a morel.
Now, in our world, a morel is a highly sought-after edible mushroom, very mundane.
Delicious, with some butter and garlic.
Exactly. But in Aldous's hothouse, it is a sentient, highly intelligent parasitic fungus, and it drops from the canopy directly onto Gren's head.
And it doesn't just bite him, it interfaces with him.
Yeah.
It physically connects to his nervous system.
Let's talk about the biological mechanism here, because this actually taps into some real-world science that is deeply unsettling.
Please do.
Aldous is likely drawing on the real-world phenomenon of neuroparasitology. Think of Ophiocordyceps unilateralis.
That's the zombie ant fungus, right?
Yes, the fungus that infects carpenter ants. It hijacks the ant's nervous system, forcing the ant to abandon its colony, climb to a specific height, and lock its mandibles onto a leaf.
And then the fungus just erupts from the ant's head to spread its spores.
Right. The fungus doesn't just consume the ant, it drives it. It uses it as a vehicle.
And the morel does exactly that to Gren, but with a horrifying upgrade. The morel is incredibly intelligent.
It possesses an intellect far surpassing the devolved humans.
Once it taps into Gren's brain, it doesn't just force him to walk. It accesses his cognitive functions. It can inflict agonizing pain to force his compliance.
It's essentially torturing him from the inside.
Yeah. And it eventually even takes over Gren's girlfriend, Poily, turning them both into puppets.
The terror here is the complete loss of agency. A trapper-snapper kills your body. The morel erases your identity while keeping your body alive to use as a tool.
It's the ultimate violation. But, as the story goes on, the dynamic between Gren and the morel gets kind of muddy. It isn't just a simple parasite-host relationship, is it? It borders on symbiosis, even if it's completely forced.
That's the friction point Aldous is exploring, because the morel isn't just a tyrant, it is a repository of ancient data.
How so?
Because it connects directly to Gren's brain, it begins to mine what Aldous calls his racial memories. The fungus delves into the buried genetic history of humanity.
Oh, wow.
Through this interface, the morel gains an understanding of what the Earth used to be, and in return, Gren is exposed to an intelligence and a historical context that his primitive, devolved brain could never have accessed on its own.
So the parasite is actually elevating him, intellectually speaking.
In a weird way, yes.
It's almost like hooking a basic pocket calculator up to a massive supercomputer. The bandwidth is incredible, but the calculator doesn't get a say in what equations it's running.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. The intelligence comes at the cost of free will.
He's seeing the big picture, but can't do anything about it.
Gren is experiencing the world in high definition for the first time, but he is no longer the one making the choices. He is just a passenger in his own skull.
That is so claustrophobic.
Yeah.
So, driven by the morel's insatiable ancient curiosity, Gren and Poily are forced to march across the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative structure here shifts into this twisted, hallucinatory road trip.
The morel wants to understand the world, and it just uses Gren's legs to go exploring.
They pick up another outcast along the way, a pregnant woman from a different tribe named Yatmur. And as they travel, Aldous subjects the reader to just a relentless parade of ecological horrors.
The environment they traverse is a masterclass in building tension.
They encounter phenomena like the skirt of the black mouth,
which is a massive plant-based organism that functions like a siren from Greek mythology.
Right, using psychic or sonic lures to draw prey into its maw.
But the encounter that carries the most thematic weight is their discovery of the tummy belly men.
Oh, the tummy belly men. That stopped me in my tracks. It is such a grotesque, brilliant concept.
It's very disturbing imagery.
Yeah, they find a group of half-human creatures sitting around the base of a massive tree. But they aren't just sheltering under it, they are physically attached to it.
By literal umbilical cords connecting their abdomens directly to the trunk of the parasitic tree.
The tree provides them with a constant stream of nutrients, and in exchange, they serve the tree's biological needs.
Which could be protection or perhaps waste distribution or, and this is the dark thought, perhaps they are just a captive food source for when the tree needs extra energy.
They've completely surrendered to the tree. And when Gren sees this, he has a visceral reaction. He takes his knife and he actually slashes the umbilical cords of several of these tummy belly men, forcibly severing them from the tree and taking them along on their journey.
The mirroring here is just incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
Gren is running around the forest, physically untethered, but he's mentally enslaved by the morel. Meanwhile, the tummy belly men are physically tethered to a tree, their minds utterly blank from generations of passive dependency.
He cuts their cords to free them, completely blind to the fact that he is trapped in the exact same parasitic relationship.
Exactly. It's such a blind spot for him.
It's a phenomenal exploration of different kinds of parasitism. In biology, we look at the spectrum from mutualism, where both species benefit, to commensalism, to outright parasitism.
And Aldous maps this biological concept directly onto social structures.
Right. The tummy belly men represent societal parasitism, the willingness of a population to trade their autonomy and independence for guaranteed comfort and sustenance.
They gave up their freedom for a feeding tube.
And we really must view this through the lens of the era. Hot House was written in the early 1960s.
Right, a lot of cultural shifts happening then.
It was a time of massive cultural anxiety regarding conformity, the rise of heavily structured suburban life, and the looming monolithic threat of Cold War superpowers.
People were terrified of becoming just another cog in the machine.
There was a pervasive fear that human individuality was being absorbed by massive, unthinking systems. The tummy belly men are the physical manifestation of a society that has just given up.
So Gren frees a few of them, and this bizarre, mismatched group manages to escape on a boat, floating down a river toward the ocean. But the escape is chaotic, and during the flight, Poily is tragically killed.
The death of Poily is the narrative turning point for Gren's internal struggle.
Why is her death the main catalyst? Because she was controlled by the morel too, right?
She was, but she was also Gren's final anchor to his own humanity. She was his only link to his past, to the banyan tree, to who he was before the fungus dropped on his head.
Ah, I see.
Yatmur is an outsider. The tummy belly men are essentially livestock at this point. With Poily gone, the Morel's dominance over Gren's psyche goes practically unchallenged. The loss of that human connection accelerates his isolation.
So we have a grieving, isolated Gren, completely dominated by a hyper-intelligent mushroom, floating down a river with a pregnant woman and a handful of traumatized men who don't even know how to feed themselves.
It's a bleak boat ride.
Very. And this boat ride brings them to the physical edge of their known world, which sets the stage for the philosophical climax of the book.
The river eventually deposits them at the Terminator.
And as we discussed earlier, on a tidally locked planet, the Terminator is the dividing line between the day hemisphere and the night hemisphere.
It is a static, permanent twilight zone. On one side is the eternal hothouse, on the other an abyss of frozen darkness.
It is the literal edge of the world, and life at the edge has evolved very differently. They encounter two new, distinct species of intelligence here. First, they meet the sharp furs, which are essentially tribal baboons that have evolved the capacity for speech and basic tool use.
But the more significant encounter is with the Sodolye.
The Sodolye. Out of all the bizarre creations in this book, a hyper-intelligent, land-traveling dolphin is the one that somehow feels the most sci-fi.
It is very out there, but the Sodolye represents an entirely different evolutionary trajectory.
Dolphins in our world are already highly intelligent.
Exactly. In the hothouse future, this dolphin has developed a biological or technological apparatus that allows it to operate on land.
Like a little land suit?
Sort of, yes. More importantly, its intelligence is analytical, calculating, and somewhat arrogant.
A stark contrast to the others.
Right. It starkly contrasts with the aggressive, consuming intelligence of the Morel and the devolved, instinctual minds of the humans.
So the Sodolye takes one look at Gren and immediately deduces the parasitic nature of the Morel. The dolphin, working with Yatmur, devises a trap. They manage to coax the Morel off Gren's head and trap it in a bowl.
And just like that, the cord is cut.
Gren is free. His mind is his own again.
It seems like a huge triumph, but it is incredibly short-lived.
Yeah, because the Morel is billions of years old in terms of its genetic memory. A simple bowl isn't going to hold it for long.
It escapes, and it quickly realizes that Gren is an obsolete vehicle, so it immediately launches itself onto the Sodolye, hijacking the highly evolved brain of the dolphin.
Talk about a hardware upgrade.
Right.
The Morel just swapped a dial-up connection for fiber optics. It now has a host with an intellect capable of processing the Morel's vast cosmic ambitions.
And right at this exact moment, Aldous brings all the chaotic plot threads crashing back together.
Yeah, who suddenly drops out of the sky but Lilio and the Flymen.
Talk about timing.
They have flown down from the moon on one of their kidnapping raids.
So, the Morel, now piloting the dolphin, sees the pieces on the board and formulates a plan of breathtaking scale. It isn't interested in just surviving the hothouse anymore.
It wants to go bigger.
Much bigger. It takes control of one of the colossal traversers, the giant space spiders. The Morel intends to pilot this planetary-scale organism past the moon, out into the deep void of space, to seed other star systems.
And it plans to take Lilio, the Flyman, and the remaining humans with it as its crew, or, let's be honest, more likely its biological cargo.
Before they launch, the Morel delivers this incredibly sweeping, chilling monologue. It is really the thesis statement of the entire novel.
Yeah, the fungus explains its motivation. It says, all life is tending towards the mindless, the infinitesimal. Under steadily increasing heat, devolutionary processes accelerate.
That is the philosophical core of Hothouse.
It's all about entropy.
Exactly. The Morel understands entropy. It recognizes that the Earth is a closed system undergoing terminal heat death.
So the giant plants aren't actually thriving?
No, the hypergrowth of the plants isn't a sign of vitality. It's the frenzied final gasp of a dying biosphere. The intense radiation is breaking down complex life, forcing it to become simpler, more parasitic, more instinctual.
And the Morel concludes that the only way to escape this inevitable devolution is to abandon the planet entirely.
It views itself as a cosmic savior, carrying the genetic heritage of Earth to a new world.
It's offering them the ultimate escape pod. It is basically saying, this world is doomed. I have a biological spaceship. Come with me, transcend this dying planet, and become citizens of the cosmos.
And this leads to the final, defining choice.
Gren, Yatmur, and their newly born baby are standing at the Terminator line. They have the opportunity to leave, They can transcend.
And what is their choice?
They say no.
It's amazing.
They reject the stars, they turn their backs on the cosmic ascension, and they choose to walk back into the terrifying, predatory green hell of the forest. They choose to go home.
It is a stunning rejection of standard science fiction mythology.
That's so.
Well, the traditional Campbellian hero's journey in sci-fi almost always ends with ascension. The hero leaves the cradle of Earth and embraces the stars. Think of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, which culminates in humanity transcending its physical form.
Oh, right. We always want to go up.
Aldous offers two starkly different futures here. You can have cosmic post-human survival, but you will lose your fundamental human identity to a parasitic intelligence. Or you can return to a primitive, biological existence on a doomed world, but you get to remain human.
And Gren chooses the doomed world.
He does.
I found myself pacing around my living room after reading that ending. It is so counterintuitive, yet it feels perfectly tragic.
It fits his arc perfectly.
Right. Think about Gren's entire arc. He started out as the rebel who despised the conformity of his tribe. He wanted to be an individual.
But after experiencing the profound psychic isolation of the Morel's control, after staring into the cold, calculating void of the universe, he realizes that individuality without connection is just another form of death.
He chooses his small, flawed, primitive family over becoming a godlike being.
He accepts that to be human requires community, even if that community is destined to be eaten by the sun.
It is the ultimate rejection of transcendence for the sake of connection.
And the ending offers no false hope. The sun is still expanding, the trapper-snappers are still hunting, Gren and Yachtmore are walking back into a meat grinder.
They might survive a few more years, maybe a generation, if they're lucky.
But Aldous is arguing that meaning isn't derived from eternal survival. It is derived from the act of continuing to live, to love, and to maintain our humanity in the face of an entirely indifferent universe.
And that deep emotional resonance is exactly why we are still unpacking this book over 60 years later.
Without a doubt.
So as we pull back from the hothouse, let's kind of synthesize what we've learned. How do we reconcile the structural mess with the thematic brilliance?
Well, the critical consensus on Hothouse is that it remains a deeply unsettling, visionary masterwork. Reviewers often call it tour de force, precisely because it has the power to startle even the most jaded science fiction readers.
We don't really need to apologize for its flaws, do we?
Not at all. The plot is episodic. It lurches from an attack by a giant wasp to a space spider moon trip to a sentient mushroom body snatcher. The physics are entirely fanciful.
But those flaws are exactly what give the book its power. I mean, if Aldous had slowed down to populate the delta V requirements of a space spider, the dream would have completely collapsed.
You're touching on the exact reason it resonates. It is a book deeply rooted in the cultural consciousness of the early 1960s.
Psychedelic era.
Yes, it reflects the burgeoning era of psychedelic experimentation, the blurring of boundaries, the expansion of the mind, the hallucinatory shifting imagery. It also taps into the infancy of the modern ecological movement.
Forcing the reader to confront that humanity is not separate from nature, but deeply vulnerable to it.
Exactly. Aldous's prose regarding the vegetation is practically feverish. He builds an atmosphere of oppressive, humid terror that very few authors have ever successfully replicated.
So to bring this all back to why you, the listener, should care about a 1962 novel about smart mushrooms and giant spiders, you don't read Hothouse to pass a physics exam.
Definitely not.
If you want to understand orbital mechanics, there are fantastic textbooks out there. You read Hothouse to experience the sublime terror of an environment that does not care about you.
You read it to strip away the illusion of control.
Right. To ask yourself what remains of the human spirit when the safety nets are gone. As one of the critics in our source material summarized, it is a book that simply made me think and made me wonder.
And in the realm of speculative fiction, that is the highest possible achievement. A great sci-fi novel forces you to inhabit an entirely alien landscape, and when you finally put the book down and look around your own living room, you see your own world with fresh, slightly more paranoid eyes.
Let's quickly recap the incredible, bizarre journey we just took.
It's been a lot.
We started on a tidally locked Earth, billions of years in the future, where a dying sun has fueled the rise of a hyper-aggressive, carnivorous plant kingdom.
We watched humanity devolved into stoic, insect-like communities struggle to survive at the bottom of the food chain.
We witnessed the surreal biological ascension of the elders journeying to the moon.
We followed Gren as his mind was hijacked by the ancient, calculating intelligence of the Morel, serving as a terrifying metaphor for the loss of identity and agency.
And ultimately, we saw Gren make the profound choice to reject the cold perfection of the stars in favor of embracing his fragile, doomed humanity.
It is a narrative that clearly demonstrates that while the literal science of a story may be entirely broken, the philosophical questions it raises about evolution, the nature of the self, and the cost of survival can be startlingly accurate.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought. A way to take Aldous' nightmare and apply it to the world we live in right now.
If we look at the core premise of Hot House, Aldous imagined a future where extreme, hostile conditions forced humanity to devolve. The unrelenting physical struggle, the constant threat of death, stripped away our emotional and intellectual complexity.
The danger made them simple.
But what if the opposite is also true?
Look at the modern world we are building for ourselves. We are obsessively constructing our own kinds of hothouses.
We live in environments that are perfectly temperature controlled.
We carry devices that instantly cater to our every intellectual whim and map our routes so we never get lost. We curate our digital ecosystems to ensure we only encounter ideas we already agree with.
We are relentlessly insulating ourselves from physical danger, from intellectual friction, and from discomfort.
Right. So if Aldous was right, and a hostile environment forces us to devolve to survive, what does a perfectly safe, entirely frictionless environment do to the human spirit over a long enough timeline?
Are our modern comforts fundamentally rewiring us?
Without even realizing it, are we slowly turning ourselves into a new generation of tummy belly men?
Happily tethered by digital umbilical cords to the endless, passive nourishment of our technology, while our autonomy and our resilience just quietly wither away?
It is a profoundly unsettling question to ask. But it's exactly the kind of question that a journey through Aldous' bizarre, terrifying jungle prepares us to face.
It definitely leaves you thinking.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the wildly imaginative, deeply chaotic world of Brian Aldous' Hot House.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it challenged your perspectives, and we hope it made you wonder. Stay curious, maybe look twice at the houseplants in your living room, and keep exploring.